that's up and running, I'll hand over to Mr. Chairman.
You're live, Alan. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this. We are meeting this evening normally with a scrutiny panel of Colchester Borough Council, but we're meeting as the Crime and Disorder Committee, which in effect is the same people who sit on scrutiny, but for tonight it's crime and disorder, and that is the only subject on the agenda. We're joined by lots of guests, including the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for Essex, and you're all very welcome, and thank you for giving your time up to come and speak to us. My name is Kevin Bentley, and this meeting is being held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021. Now, I'm the Councillor for Marks Tay and Layer, or one of the Councillors for Marks Tay and Layer, I should say, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available to watch afterwards. Just a few housekeeping notes, with the exception of Democratic Service officers. In this case, it's Mr. Owen Howell, who will be advising the panel, and me particularly as chair. Would all participants please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak, which you've done, and thank you very much indeed. As etiquette, I think we all fully understand now. Very shortly, I would ask for each item of business to be presented, and then ask each member of the panel in turn if they wish to ask a question or comment. At the end of each item of business, I'll ask each panel member in turn to confirm audibly if they how they wish to vote, if we need to get a vote. And probably tonight we don't, other than maybe a vote of thanks, but we'll see how we go. If we're still going at 7:30, then I will put it to the committee if they wish to take a break at that point. I'm now going to ask all my colleagues on the committee with me to introduce themselves and from which ward they are from. In no particular order, just as I see you on the screen, I'm going to start with Councillor Sam McCarthy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Sam McCarthy and I represent Shrub End Ward.
Dave Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Dave Harris representing Beerchurch Ward, standing in for Tina Bourne, and I grabbed the chance to come and join you, Chair, to support the work of your committee.
Thank you very much indeed. If we can note the substitution then, Mr. Howell, I'll save me asking it later. Lewis.
Good evening, Councillor Lewis Barber for Lexington and Braeswick Ward.
Mike.
Sorry, I didn't hear
Mike
that.
Hogg. Mike Hogg.
Oh.
Good evening, Chairman. Sorry about it. I misheard you. Councillor Mike Hogg, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Thank you, Chris Hayter.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Chris Hayter for St John's and St Anne's Ward.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Stanway Ward.
And Lorcan.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Can I ask, we've got some, certainly one visiting cabinet member that I can see, so can I ask Mike to just introduce himself, Mike Lilly?
It's Councillor Mike Lilly. I'm the cabinet member for Communities, Public Safety and Health and Wellbeing.
Thank you. I don't think I see any other cabinet members unless I've missed them. Are there any, Mr. Howell? Is it just, when I say just Michael, I don't mean that, you know what I mean, but is it, there's no others? That's fine. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes.
And I just want to remind colleagues that tonight, although we have Mr. Roger Hurst, who is the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for Essex, not here to scrutinise his work. He has a bigger panel right across the county that does that. I'm sure holds his feet to the fire all the time. That's not our function tonight. Our function is to listen to the work that is being undertaken locally within the Colchester Borough area by the police and other agencies, as you will hear. And then if Mr. wishes to come in with any added value questions, then please do, or points. It doesn't mean we can't ask him questions, but there'll be no scrutiny of his work because that's not what we're here to do. Okay, item number 2 we've done, which is substitutions. We've got Councillor Harris for Councillor Bourne. Item number 3, I just have to go through this just for the record, colleagues. It will be very quick and then we'll be on to the work. Item 3, there are no urgent items. Can I just, item 4, ask if there's declarations of interest, which you can do now or at any time during the course of the meeting if they become relevant?
Chairman, could I declare an interest in,
yes, of course,
in the item in the view that I am a personal licence holder for the sale of alcohol for a registered charity in Colchester.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Right. Any other declarations of interest? You can declare as we go through. No, that's fine. Thank you. Item number 5 are the minutes. Now, these are the minutes of the last crime disorder panel, not the last scrutiny panel. That was on the 15th of September. Are you happy that they're a true and accurate record first before I go to the vote? Any comments on them? I see no hands. When we come to ask questions, can I ask you to use, do we have the electronic hand function, Mr. Howell, on this?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
Use your electronic hand, please. And between Mr. Howell and myself, we'll keep an eye on that to make sure we can do the right order. Although, as you know, I tend to go through the panelists name by name. But if there's any additional questions you want to ask. So on the basis they're approved, at some stage when I can, I shall come and sign what must be a mountain of minutes now to go through, electronically, of course, but through paper. Item number 6, have your say. Now, we do have quite a few speakers this evening. They will come in this order. Councillor Roger Mannion, this is how they were received. That's why they will come in this order. Louise Wishart, Chris Pickett, and Catherine Spindler, who's not here, but I will ask Mr. Howell to read her question for her, and we'll go and get answers. We'll make a note of the answers as well. Councillor Roger Mannion from Tiptree Parish Council. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. As you've said, Council, and a number of residents have asked this question and so I'm asking it of the committee on their behalf. How is the government funding provided to the council for the COVID marshals being used? How many marshals are there? What are they doing? And what are the outcomes? There is significant funding available, but does this have an impact on the communities, particularly when community volunteers are doing so much with so little and no support?
Councillor Mannion, thank you for your question. Thank you very much indeed. This work comes from the portfolio of Councillor Michael Lilly, who I think will answer the question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. The COVID marshals, we got some money from the government, which is very nice of them, and we had enough to have 2 marshals, and their job at the time was to go around the businesses and shops that were allowed to be open under the new COVID regulations, and to make sure that they were sticking to those regulations. If they weren't, then advice would be given and further visits will be made after that by the marshals indeed. They got a vehicle provided to them so they could get around the whole of the borough. Since then, we have now got 1 marshal on full time, and his job is to actually look at all the complaints that we have from members of the public, and his job is to go around and follow them up, because there's not a lot to do in the town centre at the moment because there's not a lot of places open. But so he does visit Mersey, Wivenhoe, all over the place, and that's their main role, is to give advice, visit, and then pass on the information on to our licensing team. If they feel that they're not sticking to the regulations, then a visit will be made more official and a warning will be given. So the marshals have been very handy for us. It's an extra part of our team because we've got quite a small team in the licensing and food team. Obviously, they've got 600 odd places to visit, and there's 5 people in that team. So yeah, it's very handy to have, and they're very, very useful indeed. So I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Lilly, thank you very much indeed. Let's go then to Louise Wishart.
Good evening, everyone. I'm attending tonight on behalf of the Dutch Court and Williams Walk Neighbourhood Watch Group. I've attended the meeting in the past and explained the issues faced by residents living in Colchester town centre. I'd like to ask for an update on the revised timetable for installation of improved CCTV in Colchester. My understanding is the council approved significant investment in CCTV in the 2021 capital plan. I'm not clear if this remains in the refreshed 2021 capital plan or perhaps the 21-22 plan. But please can I have an update on the status and, if it is still there, the planned timetable for this investment, which I hope will help to reduce crime in Colchester and make residents feel safer. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for the question. Again, Councillor Michael Lilly will respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good evening, Louise. Good to see you again. One day we'll be around. I'll be around for tea and cake at your neighbourhood watch meetings. So we did. The operating system is actually in place now. We had loads of issues to do with Colchester, the poor connections and such. So the new operating system for the control room is all fully built because we had to start from scratch because it's all brand new stuff. The control room is fully built and is now operational. It's working with existing cameras and the ones that we had. And with the next stage on that being the renovation of the control room itself, ready for the team to move back in. It's still in the same place that it was before in the town hall. So we've got 40 new cameras on top of the ones we already had. They're deployed across the town centre into the car parks. And also we've got some at the Northern Gateway Sports Park, which we're using as a trial to check that we can connect remotely rather than on like a wireless connection. So if we could do that and it works great, which it should do, then we'll be looking at put more cameras in more remote areas, such as Tiptree, Mersey, Greenstead, Wivenhoe, and we can connect up into the main room without actually going there. So that's a really great news for the future and that. So we use a new fibre layer connecting cameras. It's a lot more complicated with the technology. They connect up to nodes and they're all working normally. But we have got an issue, and perhaps Councillor Bentley could to help with his other hat on, and that's we're having some issues with highways. And that's to do with, of course, as always is, digging up the streets to put in the cables and that. So we're in our 7th month negotiations with them. Most of it is actually done and agreed. So there's still a few more bits and pieces to do because the cables carry the data to the new cameras and back again. So hopefully when all that is done, we're looking to have everything up and ready. It's working now in mid-June. Some of the cameras, Louise will know, some of the new locations. We won't tell you all of them because obviously it's for security reason, but there are several going into the Dutch Quarter, several going in Eld Lane and the Vineyard Street tunnels where we had requests from police and residents and that. So we're happy that we've got better coverage we ever did of the town centre, and we're now looking to moving outside of it as well. I'll send you the information by email, Louise, just for your records and that. So hopefully we'll be done by mid-June. I hope that's okay.
Councillor Lilly, thank you very much. It sounds like good news. Of course, I don't sit here with that other hat on tonight.
No.
But on the other hand, if you're doing it by mid-June, sounds like it's actually happening, which is really good news. So thank you for that. I'm very grateful. Let's move then on to Chris Piggott. Mr. Chris Piggott.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I would like to ask the committee, what are the plans to reduce speeding in the south of Colchester? So I observed closely what the Essex Police are doing in areas, and I noticed there's been some good work going into reduction of speed on some main roads, which is really good. But residents have highlighted to me that there's concerns of speeding on the estates, particularly where it's built up and visibility is poor. Are we just relying on people reporting this, or do we have an action plan? If so, what is that plan? And can I have your reassurance that you're looking into this and promoting road safety? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Piggott, thank you very much indeed. The speeding enforcement is not a matter for Colchester Borough Council, but of course you've come to the meeting, and we're very delighted to have Chief Inspector John Evans with us, who is I'm very grateful he said he would answer this question.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Piggott. In terms of speeding, you've mentioned the work that our teams are doing. So not only our road traffic units, but our local community teams are enforcing speeding across the district. In terms of, is there an action plan in place? Well, as and when we're reporting, and based on the level of reporting, we're directing our resources in terms of speeding enforcement for those areas. But obviously, as you would know, that is not a long-term solution to issues in terms of speeding. So yes, it would help with the reduction of speeding, but for a long-term solution, that's obviously a highways and Essex County Council issue around the road makeup, etc. But by all means, the team would respond to any reports of speeding and do some appropriate enforcement in that area. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And also, Chief Inspector, thank you very much indeed. The final public questions actually will be a statement read by Mr. Howell on behalf of Catherine Spindler.
I'll just bring that up, Mr. Chairman. There we go. There we go. Sorry, apologies. Okay, statement starts. Thank you for allowing me to put what is a very personal question for me and my family. All of us are impacted by drugs, whether it be through antisocial behaviour or a friend or a member of the family suffering from the consequences of addiction. One element of some positivity during this long lockdown and restrictions is that the big drug dealers and their suppliers are more evident. I wish to record my praise and appreciation to both the police and council officers who have worked so hard to see through prosecutions and evictions of these predators. For many living with nearby drug dealers, they go through hell. Constant noise, disruption, violence, and even threats. These are life-changing experiences that I can vouch for when my young son witnessed a drug addict slitting his own throat. No one deserves this near their home. With that in mind, and many residents either too terrified or feeling that through understandable lack of response, they are not being taken seriously, so give up, how can we in the community encourage these victims to continue and persevere with critical information for prosecutions and evictions? Another evident concern with more dog walkers about is the amount of dog mess on pavements. Will you please liaise with local neighbourhood watch coordinators with instructions on how they can help to spot and report dog fouling? Statement ends.
Thank you. Well, the dog fouling part is really Colchester Borough Council rather than the police. And I don't know if you want to comment on that afterwards. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, let me know, or you can ask one of your colleagues to do it later in a written form. The first part about the drugs, once again, this is the right forum to answer the question, although not a responsibility of enforcement by Colchester Borough Council. And we have the Chief Inspector who very kindly said he would answer the question. Chief Inspector.
Okay, so firstly, I'm thankful for the initial praise for the question. Secondly, how can we support people in reporting these matters? Well, there's obviously Crime Stoppers, where people can report things without being known who they are. There's obviously our Essex Police Online method of reporting, or they can report matters directly to the community policing team via our communication network, our email. In terms of supporting these people, we've obviously got an Operation Raptor teams that deal across Colchester District and across the LPA, tackling county lines activity. But our community policing team are really the community linked in any sort of concerns around ASD or drugs issues. We've got a very good working relationship and partnership with the housing associations and Colchester Borough Homes, where we've done a number of evictions or closure orders in the last 12 months. So we definitely would pursue that as an enforcement, and also support victims if they're a victim of cuckooing or any other element around that to do the safeguarding.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly, you don't have to answer this if you'd rather not, or you can if you're welcome to, about the dog fouling element.
I'll give it a go. It's actually my portfolio is under Councillor Goss's one, but we do deal with an awful lot. Every councillor has the same issue. So if they witness somebody as animal is foul on the pavement, then we ask those people to make a statement to our enforcement officers, and action will be taken and a prosecution will be taken out if we have a witness to that. Obviously, if you see dog mess on there, we have to prove that a certain dog owned by a certain person has done that. So obviously it's a bit hit and miss really, but if someone has witnessed or they know someone who's doing it, then please get in touch with the council and they'll sort out. Funny enough, I had one yesterday, a report come in, and it's from Newtown as well, that they've witnessed somebody doing that. Those people have actually volunteered to make a statement, so hopefully that will lead to a prosecution and it will lead to other people taken notice, and don't let your dog foul the pavements. It really is. How many years are we going to have the same message over and over again? But hopefully that answers the question for you, Chair.
Absolutely, thank you very much indeed. Mr. Howell, thank you for reading the question out, and thanks to the Chief Inspector and Councillor Lee for responding. I'm conscious that Catherine Spindler is not here, so first of all, alert her to at what point the question was answered on the YouTube channel so she could see it. And if that's not convenient for her, perhaps we could supply a transcript of what's been said to her as well. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Can I just also ask you, Mr. Howell, are we inviting our public speakers to leave the meeting and follow us now on YouTube, or to stay in the meeting, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we could follow the usual procedure and ask our guests, members of the public, to leave this Zoom meeting, and then you can tune into our Zoom, into our YouTube live stream, if that be possible. Also, if I could just take this moment to say that we've had a few members of the partnership and a few officers who have reported very bad internet connections currently. So we're keeping a monitoring eye out as to whether anyone drops out. If you do drop out and you have our contact details, please do let us know. And if you need any help being readmitted, we can help.
Thank you very much indeed. Members of the public, thank you for coming along, and please go and watch us on YouTube. You'll help boost our viewer ratings no end if you do that. Thanks very much indeed. Right, let's then move on to the substantive item tonight, which is item number 7, Safer Colchester Partnership. I'd like to introduce formally to the meeting Pam Donnelly, who's Strategic Director of Customer Relationships at Colchester Borough Council, and again, Councillor Mike Lilly, a portfolio holder for communities, wellbeing and public safety, to lead us into the presentation before we get to the questions. Pam Donnelly first, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our partners this evening for joining us. Some of them have been able to take the time out this evening to be part of the meeting, but others haven't been able to do so. And as chair of the Community Safety Partnership, I owe a great debt of gratitude to every single one of them, right across the partnership, including our colleagues here tonight from the Institute, from the voluntary sector, Community 360, fire, police, children's services, the list goes on. And I'm very grateful to them for their support throughout the year this evening, and particularly in terms of the unparalleled response to the COVID-19 crisis. Many of you on the call will know that the Community Safety Partnership is an integral part of One Colchester, the strategic partnership for Colchester. And I think it's in that framework that we have been really successful in bringing together our partners for the benefits of our residents. But after all, it will be the residents that judge that. I'd also like to thank Roger Hurst, our Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, for joining us this evening, and alert you to the paper, the very detailed paper that you have in front of you, authored by my colleague Sonia Carr and her team. So I'd like to thank them for their efforts. And there is one particular point that I think is worth bringing to your attention. I'm not sure if Councillor Mannion has taken the opportunity to rejoin us, but I would refer him in relation to his specific question to Appendix B of the report, page 39. That might be helpful in briefing his colleagues in Tiptree Parish Council. And I'd also like to note the work of Charlotte Williams, who's on the call this evening, who's been leading the Marshall work. And I'm sure Charlotte would be happy to speak to Councillor Mannion and anyone else who wants to know more about the scheme. So this evening, the plan is pretty straightforward. I will hand over in a moment to the portfolio holder, Councillor Lilly, who you've already heard from this evening, who will provide a very brief introduction to the evening's events. We'll then hand over to John Evans, Temporary Chief Inspector John Evans, who's standing in for our Borough Commander, Rob Huddleston, who's away for a little while. And a great thank you to you, John, for all the work that you do in supporting the partnership. And then it's my pleasure then to turn to Beverly Jones, who is with us this evening, Chief Executive of Next Chapter. And I know that many of you have a great interest in the work that Next Chapter does in relation to supporting victims of domestic abuse. So I believe that John, well, I know that John has a very short presentation which focuses on the partnership's priorities, which are clearly outlined in the report, which I was hoping I could assume was read. And I know Beverly, although she doesn't have a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, she's going to take roughly 10 minutes just to take us through, so we can maximise the amount of time that's available to the panel. So thank you, Chair. I'll hand over now, if I may, to Councillor Lee, our portfolio holder and Cabinet Member for Community Safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. That's very good as always. Yeah, it's been a very strange year. We actually had another meeting doing last year and the end of last year. So COVID has affects everybody and it's affected crime and all that stuff. But it has affected the county lines from still carrying on and working. They actually think that people are not going to notice them more by what's happening. But the police have been very active and positive in doing that. So where we are as a council, we still continue to work with all our partners in a very much big team. As you can see here tonight, there's a lot of people here that we talk to, probation, NHS, and the police, of course, and Roger's here tonight as well. So we all work really well together. There's issues that come in, we know where they go, we hopefully try and sort them out. There's a couple of items this year that we've taken forward as a priority, and Bev will touch on this later on because she's the expert, and they'll be looking at domestic violence and a bigger picture and seeing what more work we can do in that respect of that. And the other one would be to deal with mental health. Now, where we were with the homeless people on the streets about 3 years ago, we had a massive problem in Colchester. We did introduce the PSPO, which to some was draconian and Victorian and didn't work, but we made it work. We housed an awful lot of people. Hopefully we helped an awful lot of people, and that carries on. With the tragic death of one of the street people, Cosmic, who I knew personally, spoke to him a few times, we have now spoken to mental health people, and a officer from the mental health team has now joined our brilliant outreach team, going out on the streets, patrolling and talking to people. So we hope to actually try and get some more positive action off the mental health care team, that rather than allow people to live on the streets, that we look at a bigger picture and say, well, they shouldn't be on the streets even further. But that's a massive program that we've got. But it's great that mental health now are working on the streets with our outreach workers and continue to do so. We have extended the PSPO into a couple of small areas. It goes into Newtown as well in a little bit. But if there's anything else, we'll look at it again next year. If there are issues in other areas, we will look to extend it because it works very, very well. Considering that, I'd like to give a big shout out to, not big shout out, but Roger doesn't usually like me. He's not used to me complimenting him and things, but Roger did start up his social Facebook pages and was kind enough to invite myself and some other people down, and they worked really, really well. Because obviously there's stuff that comes up for Roger and for the police and for the council. So it's good to work together as a team. So I'll leave it there, Chair. If there's other stuff that comes up for the meeting, just give me a shout. I'll jump in and hopefully we can sort things out.
Yes, Lily, thank you very much indeed. I think we're going to the Chief Inspector next.
Thank you. Just first of all, I'll give you an update, COVID update in terms of policing. So obviously this has been a unique challenge for everybody, no different for policing across the district. We've got a dedicated policing plan around the COVID pandemic called Operation Teller, which directed patrols across the district, providing visible policing and responding to incidents reported by the public and partners. Our policing response has been in conjunction with the National Police Chiefs and Colleges of Policing guidance around the 4 E's, how we deal with breaches. And in terms of COVID-related activity, that's been highlighted in the report given to the statutory partners report for this meeting. So I won't go into all the statistics around that, but in terms of demand, we've had, between this meeting and the last one, we've had 826 COVID-related incidents reported to Colchester District Police. So that gives you an idea of the level of demand there. And we've completed 1,244 hours of visible patrols in that period. We continue to work with our partners to keep people safe and reassure the community around the COVID pandemic. I've got nothing but praise for the partnership in terms of coordination between the COVID coordinator and marshals and Colchester Borough Council licensing team and police who have to deal with any business related incidents. And also I must mention Colchester Bid that have also been very instrumental around the businesses opening and the work around that prior to this latest lockdown period. So the impact on policing, firstly, our officers and staff have been amazing. We've had very few absences we have a contingency plan in place for resources and we're currently at status green for that. So that's business as usual for us. So we're able to respond to the community as usual. In terms of crime statistics, then I'll move on to that. The latest crime statistics for January 2021, overall across Colchester, crime has decreased by 10.5% from 2020 year to date, and our solve rate is up to 15.8% overall year to date. On the downside, reports of antisocial behaviour has seen a significant increase across the district, up by 34%. And this is partly due to the change in ASB categories, including COVID-related ASB issues. Levels of hate crime have increased by 16.2%. So in terms of CSP priorities, priority 1, tackling gangs and county lines. Colchester District has seen an increase in the level of drug-related offences and drug trafficking offences, up 21.4% recorded in this area, whilst COVID restrictions have seen a decrease in core volume crime types, drugs offences have risen. The team has been extremely proactive in their approach to tackling this issue across the district. Operation Pegasi, which is Colchester District's version of Operation Sceptre, which is a Home Office funded operation, sees deployments of both uniform and plainclothes officers into the community. We use intelligence-led stop and search tactics to deal with crime. We've had over 5,000 stop and searches recorded across the district for the year to date, with a positive rate of 35.2% for the stop and search rate there. So you'll see how effective that is at 1 in 3 searches. The community policing team in this area have executed 18 misuse of drugs act warrants across the district between the period of September and January in order to tackle the criminality associated not only with drug use but with antisocial behaviour across the district and the distress that brings to the community. This county lines activity presents not only an enforcement challenge to police, but the safeguarding issues that this model of criminality presents, with vulnerable members of the public being subject to cocoon, with dealers using their premises as operating bases and juveniles potentially being exploited as drugs runners. Our Op Raptor teams, who are a force-wide unit from the Essex Police Vulnerability and Violence Command, primary focus is to combat urban street gangs and county lines activity. They operate out of Colchester Police Station. The team have dedicated safeguarding officers to provide additional safeguarding to vulnerable individuals affected by county lines. The Op Raptor teams have dismantled 2 county lines operating in Colchester in its entirety during the period under review. And furthermore, there's going to be further awareness training in relation to cocooning through the Violence and Vulnerability Unit, with a national expert delivering the training across partner agencies and police.
Yeah.
Our multi-agency coordination panel is a multi-agency panel which tackles organised crime and criminal gangs using the multi-agency approach. So together with partners, we share information and tasks to disrupt the criminals, in addition to safeguarding vulnerable individuals. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So priority 2, driving down antisocial behaviour and violent crime in public places. So as I alluded to previously, antisocial behaviour has increased by 34%, and that's partly, but not solely, down to COVID-related reporting matters. Through the lockdown period, the team has responded to raised concerns by the community, and the new Community Safety Engagement Officers, or CSEOs, have been vital in the coordination of the police response. We are extremely fortunate to have a very close working relationship with the housing associations across the district and Colchester Borough Homes, who have worked together to tackle ASB relating to residential premises across the district, and have participated in a number of ASB trigger reviews relating to ASB matters across the district. Operation Vocal. So this operation is our rural policing operation to provide visible presence in our rural communities. And this includes responding to reports from the community around excess speed and ASB. So violent crime against the person offences has seen a slight reduction of 0.2% across the district, and a reduction in sexual offences by 9.2%, and robbery by 22.6%, and possession of weapons offences is also down 20.5%. But whilst the district has seen 3 very unrelated tragic events across the district in the period of reporting, with 3 murders taking place across the district. 2 of those incidents on the Grinstead estate, and 1 in Oldham, which is a rural village across the district. In relation to these, all the suspects involved have been arrested and charged and remanded for court. Our teams throughout our force tasking target individuals responsible for serious violence and the carrying of weapons across the district, with intelligence-led deployments. So nighttime economy, we have a 4P plan in place to reduce harm caused during the nighttime economy. Obviously, currently, that is in lockdown. But when this is reintroduced, we will have a very early partnership meeting to plan for the opening of the nighttime economy, and we'll have dedicated resources in place to police this area of business. Okay, slide 3, please. So priority 3, increasing confidence in identifying and reporting hidden harms. So hate crime has seen a rise across the districts of 16.2%. Our community policing team investigate reports of hate crime and a solve rate of 12.6%. So what are we doing to raise awareness of hate crime across the district? So we've now got 80 trained ambassadors, hate crime ambassadors across the district, and 7 hate incident reporting centres in Colchester. So we're raising awareness. So this may well have an impact on the reporting, which I see as a good thing, because we need to know what crime is occurring so that we can take action to try and resolve that. Mental health. We've now put in place a dedicated mental health police officer who works with mental health teams in health across the district to tackle and problem solve frequent callers, repeat offenders, if you like, and safeguard those in order to reduce demand across the district caused to emergency services due to mental health issues. The independent advisory group, well, that's gone from strength to strength. We have a variety of members of the community, all different segments of the community involved in the IAG, and that's our critical friend across the district. So we provide regular updates around hate crime, stop and search stats, and we also have health on board with our IAG now. Our children and young persons officers, so they're tapped into the school safeguarding leads, and we have regular meetings with the head associations of teachers and share information and safeguard vulnerable children. So they're also working with frequent missing people and care homes, and provide youth engagement activities across the district. Domestic abuse. So Essex Police has never been more preventative than ever. We've seen an increase in our domestic abuse investigation teams. At a uniform level, we have dedicated resources for attending domestic related incidents. There's daily scrutiny around the levels of domestic incidents across the district. And through the PFCC precept growth, we're set to see the introduction of domestic abuse problem-solving teams, proactive domestic abuse arrest teams, proactive units around that. So, as I say, we're never not been more effective through our tasking process. We're looking to deal with repeat offenders using a Achilles heel approach and safeguard repeat victims. So what have we got coming up across the district? So our LPA superintendent have linked in with Next Chapter to develop further opportunities around IDVAs being involved with victims of standard risk domestic abuse at an early intervention stage to support those vulnerable individuals and assist with any prosecution and support around the prosecution, but also to safeguard those individuals. So that's a work in progress across the district and also in tendering. We're going to have the ask for, I'll say this, ANI project, which is action needed immediately to create so this is a project to create a safe place, business premises for DA victims to attend and seek help at independent locations within the community. Operation Encompass. This is about domestic abuse information sharing, where if a child has been in sight of the domestic abuse or involved in domestic abuse, then the schools are made aware of that, so they're able to put in further safeguarding and also have an understanding of maybe that child's behaviour, how their behaviour has been affected by the family environment, and then other hidden harms. So Operation Aiden is Essex Police's modern slavery operation. So across the district, we ask community policing teams link in with our modern slavery force-wide team and regularly carry out regular visits to our vulnerable business locations across the district and carry out safeguarding measures with individuals and put in any referrals that we might need to, or take any enforcement action we might need to. So sexual offences, we have Mosabo teams, our crime and public protection teams lead with that. And recently our crime and public protection team have worked with the University of Essex to do an awareness piece around sexual offences with freshers, students, etc. And then we've got our new community safety engagement officers that are focused around the district around our engagement with the community, with all different segments of community, problem solving activities for ongoing issues, and specific points of contact for our rural community. And so that's the end of my presentation. So any questions?
Well, thank you, Chief Inspector. What we'll do is we'll complete the presentations and then we'll come to questions afterwards. If that's
okay.
So we can see it all in the round as well. I think, Mr. Howell.
Apologies for interrupting, Mr. Chairman. Just to inform you that Pam Green has now joined the meeting.
Ah, good. Thank you. I think, and you're very welcome, Pam, as well. Good to see you. I think, from what I remember, the next person to present is Beverly Jones. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm aware that I produced what felt like quite a weighty report talking about the activity of Next Chapter over the last year, and I have to admit that once I started writing, I hadn't quite imagined just how much we had done. So my apologies for the length of the report. I hope that that everybody found it interesting and useful. With that in mind, thank you. With that in mind, I thought that rather than run you through the information that was provided in the report, that perhaps it might be helpful for me to talk to you about how the last year has felt for us as an organisation, and perhaps some of the issues and trends that that we have seen come up and the things that have challenged us. So as you might imagine, COVID has been the prime focus for us. For us, principally, it's been around the massive increase in referrals that we have seen in terms of domestic abuse reports. And I am conscious that the data from Essex Police perhaps is a little contrary to the data that we have seen. And I think some of that is around, as they rightly identified, the opportunity for victims to be able to report to the police given the lockdown situation. But I think also it's worth recognising that not all victims of domestic abuse want to go through the criminal justice process. Really what they're conscious of in the first place is for the domestic abuse to stop and for them to be safe and for their children to be safe. And quite often they'll come to us without actually going through to the police. So what we've seen over the last year, and particularly in the summer of 2020, was a rise of between 50 and 60% in terms of the referrals that came through to us, which is an incredibly high spike. And that upward trajectory has lasted all the way through until we got just before Christmas, when we saw what is quite a normal downturn in numbers of referrals. And quite often the psychology of that is that victims really want Christmas to be perfect. They think if they can just bite the bullet and carry on, then actually they can just get through Christmas. And then we generally see an upturn after Christmas, and this year is no different. So whilst we did see a bit of a dip, the numbers of referrals that are coming through to us are back up to the levels that we saw in the summer of 2020. What we've also seen alongside that is an increase in the risk profile of the victims that are coming through to us. I think it's a perfect storm, not only for the victim, but also for the perpetrator in terms of the lockdown, because not only can the victim not have the freedom to go out, to seek support, to be able to flee, or to get away from their perpetrator. Of course, the perpetrator is subject to the same lockdown proceedings. So some of the other things that they may well have done that takes them out of the family home, that is perhaps a little bit of release of tension, release of steam, time with friends, is not happening either. So you have a perfect storm of two people together in the house. And when home is a terrifying place to be, I can't imagine how that feels. And when you can't get away and you don't have the excuses to get away to be able to seek that support, it doesn't bear thinking about. The impact for us of that increased risk profile is that we're holding on to cases longer. They're taking more energy, more support from our practitioners, more intensive support. I think also the delays in the court process mean that we are less able to rely on emergency non-molestation orders. The amount of time that they're taking to get through the court process means that actually they're not emergency. We can't rely on them to provide safety for somebody. And I'm incredibly grateful to Pam, who helped facilitate a discussion with us and the court service so that we could start exploring some of those court delays so that they can have a look at whether there's appropriate priority that they can put to some of those applications that come through from us. And of course, as you might expect, what we've seen is a real decrease in people's mental health, which increases the intensity of the support that our practitioners need to provide. Alongside that is the impact of school closures and the lockdown on children. We know from the numbers of people that we support across Essex that there are at least 3,500 children we know who are living in households affected by domestic abuse over the last year. That's just a tip of the iceberg. The reported statistics are that generally only about 30 or 40% of people experiencing domestic abuse will actually report the crime. And there's huge statistics about numbers of children who are living in households experiencing domestic abuse. And of course, the school closures and the closure of youth clubs and other after school activities means that there's a reduced eyes on for children. There's less input from professionals, teachers, social care, youth workers, which means that actually they've become even more hidden. And I think that the true victims around this really is our young people. So the work that we have done alongside Colchester Borough Council and that partnership for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government for that additional funding to provide for the first time specialist domestic abuse support for children and young people out in the community couldn't have come at a more perfect time. These children are incredibly vulnerable. They've got the least amount of support that I think children have ever had, and the least amount of visibility. So the ability for us to go in and actively provide one-to-one support for those children and those families is incredible. As you might imagine, for our refuge services, the impact for us really is around whether our residents are catching the virus. The impact that it's had on us is that where we've had cases of COVID-19 in our refuge, we have to close our refuge to new referrals coming in. We can't in all conscience bring a new family into the refuge when we have cases of COVID-19. So that has meant that we've been working at a reduced capacity when we know that already we have referrals, twice as many referrals for our refuge spaces as we have the ability to accommodate. So working on an even lesser level has a real impact on us as well. Clearly, we've changed our way of working. It seems to be really successful. The outcomes that we're getting are really, really positive. And what we've seen is an incredible amount of partnership working. We work really, really closely with other organisations who offer complementary services, who can support the work that we do to support victims, particularly around Open Road, Outhouse, the Change Project, CARA, Family Solutions, Social Care, and of course Essex Police, who Chief Inspector has already said, we work very, very closely, and some of the new work that is coming out and rolling out across the county as a result of pilots that we've undertaken in tendering to look at the most efficient way that we can support victims of domestic abuse, but also to support that break the cycle work, which is about making sure that there are criminal justice outcomes in relation to domestic abuse offences. And of course, in terms of again, another strand of the funding that we've got through the MHCLG funding is around our work with housing departments. We're already seeing, real positive outcomes in terms of our practitioners who are working really, really closely with local authority housing departments and registered providers. The premise has always been for a woman to be safe, she has to flee. She has to walk away from her secure housing tenure. What this project is about challenging that and saying, actually, how can we work together to look at alternatives, look at different ways of providing that safety to the woman that doesn't mean that she has to walk away from the security of her housing. And I think the last couple of things that I just wanted to raise was, of course, there are always positives coming out of these situations. And whilst COVID-19 has had a devastating effect on the amount of domestic abuse that's coming through to us, what it has enabled us to do is really shine a light on something that has always been a hidden harm. It's one of those taboo subjects. It's one of those things that we don't talk about. By nature of what we do and how we provide our services and the safety that we have to guarantee or secure for the women we work with means that we can't often shine the light. We don't have a premises that we can advertise the location or that we can bring people to. We can't give photographs of the women that we work with. But what this pandemic has done is really, really raise the issue. It's raised the profile. It's enabled us to have a voice like we've never had before. And I think that can only be good for people who are experiencing it. And then very lastly, it was just a huge thank you to everybody who's worked with us to enable us to secure additional funding, inward investment into our organisation in the area, to give us the means by which to cope with the additional demand that we've been experiencing. I had a quick tot up this morning, and it's £331,000 of additional funding that we've managed to secure, which has given us the ability to employ another 7 practitioners, which has enabled us to really cope. And even those 7 practitioners at times were working with caseloads that were way bigger than they should have done. But without that, I think there would have been people that would have gone without support. So really that's us in a nutshell, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed for a very insightful presentation. The report you sent as well was excellent, thank you. I do work on the basis of my colleagues as well for reports, so we don't need to go through them again unless there's something you want to pull out. But what you've added there, I think, has just been first class and very insightful. Thank you very much indeed. We will come to questions. I think that was the last presentation. Is that right? Okay. Just before we go on to questions, could I just ask Mr. Hurst, as he's very kindly come along tonight, is there anything you wish to add or say at this stage before we get into the panel's questions? Mr. Hurst.
I think really just to say, clearly you have a very well functioning community safety partnership here. Really excited to hear what the presenters have said. Clearly there's been a good level of investment into the programs through the period of COVID-19. Next Chapter, I know, doing an amazing job. And perhaps this is also just a good opportunity to thank them for having raised an issue with me around non-molestation orders and the delays in the courts, something which I've had the opportunity to take on your behalf, actually up with the Minister of State for Justice, Chris Phillips, and I know that his team are looking into it. They were very concerned. I think it's around the issue that Bev was outlining around the fact that we don't want to do the case that the woman victim is made to leave her home. So protection orders, non-molestation orders make a big difference. And I think the courts had done quite a good job in making sure that domestic violence protection orders are dealt with fairly promptly. I'm happy to hear of evidence where it hasn't happened, and we can take that up as well. But I think non-molestation orders certainly haven't been being dealt with, and we're making sure that's picked up very much on your behalf. But equally well, good to hear from the Chief Inspector about the impact that the investment in new interventions there, particularly focused on preventing and reducing crime. So the children and young people's officers and the community safety engagement officers, they're clearly having a good impact in your borough. And yeah, an 11.5% reduction in crime is absolutely what we want to see. I guess the key point is to make sure that when we start to recover, crime doesn't recover with the rest of society. I think we just have to be conscious of the fact that whilst the pandemic and the lockdown has been dreadful for all of us, it's been difficult for criminals as well, and that's helped us reduce those criminal statistics. But I think, yeah, your priorities in terms of dealing with domestic abuse, in terms of dealing with drugs and knife crime on the streets, in terms of dealing with neighbourhood crime and antisocial behaviour, are absolutely those which the data that I see would support as being what needs to be dealt with, not just in Colchester, but pretty much across the county as a whole. And we will continue to invest as the PFCC in the sort of programmes that you're looking at here, continue to support the voluntary sector organisations that support victims. County-wide, we spend about £3 million in supporting victims on an annual basis, and about another 850,000 in preventing crime and reducing reoffending as an office. We want to do more of that, but also continue to invest in the police service. And I think the important bit, just to bring to your attention, is the budget that we have in place for Essex Police for next year will mean another 184 officers on top of the 500 and so we've recruited over the last 3 years. And that will mean that we are, again, better placed to intervene with perpetrators of domestic abuse, to intervene with those who are organising the county lines drug gangs, but also to make sure that we can support the potential victims of that, the young people they prey on. And of course, as well, to make sure that you have got the resources in place to make preventative interventions in crime hotspots and with known offenders or groups of known offenders to continue making that difference. So really excited to hear what I'm hearing this evening. And I want to say is that you are all, and Pam in particular, are clearly doing a very good job.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Right, we now move on to the panel for them to ask questions. Now, the way I operate is to make sure every panelist has the opportunity to say something. I'll go to them in name order, just the way I've written them down here. And if we come back again, mix that up a bit, so everyone's first and last. Can I say to all our guests, if anyone wishes to add anything to a comment that's being made, could you please use your electronic hands, and then Mr. Howell and myself will keep an eye on that. And feel free to chip in if you want to. Something you want to add. This is a very free-flowing conversation, not scrutiny in the usual way. And it's making sure that we get the information we think is useful for our residents, but also making sure you will have enough chance to have your say as well. So this is the order I'm going in, colleagues. It will be Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Harris, Councillor Barber, Councillor Hogg, Councillor Hayter, Councillor Dundas, and Councillor Whitehead. Okay, and again, don't feel obliged to ask questions if you don't want to. If you've heard enough, that's fine. If you do, this is the moment. And of course, you can come back anytime. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentations there as well. It's really, really helpful. There's an awful lot to chew through here, not just in the document pack and the presentations, but just the work that's been going on through such a difficult time. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions regarding priority 2, the driving down of antisocial behaviour and violent crime in public, focusing on hate crime. Chief Inspector, my apologies. I know you're going to get quite a few questions tonight, but I do have 2 for you. You mentioned in your presentation about foot patrols. These seem to be focused on the town centre. Are foot patrols taking place across the district in various wards and indeed in our rural areas? I know many residents find this massively reassuring, especially with groups of young people, not exclusively young people, but young people getting bored and resorting to ASB. And secondly, with the focus on hate crime in priority 2, my ward of Shrub End has one of the highest rates of hate crime, which really does pain me and surprise me as well. As this meeting tonight is being recorded, could I please ask that the advice be shared tonight on how best to come forward and report hate crime? That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor McCarthy, thank you. Yes, we'll make sure that's highlighted. I'll ask Mr. Howard to note out to all members so they know. Chief Inspector.
Thank you. In terms of visibility then, so during the COVID period, we've had our COVID patrol plan in place, which has provided visibility across all the districts, all the areas across the district, so rural and urban. Obviously, in terms of the town centre, we do have, a town centre team, so they obviously provide visibility there, but our community policing team is split so that the team deal with everything across the whole district. So yes, there is, in answer to your question, yes, there is foot patrols, but visibility for me isn't just about foot patrols. So there's lots of work that's going on in the background and to protect people. So our community safety engagement officers are promoting our work for the district in terms of engagement on our social media sites, through our district news update letter, through the schools, through our parish councils. We're now having regular meetings with our parish council clerks to ensure that we're engaging with our community and understanding the issues. So in terms of visibility, yes, we do have foot patrols, but unfortunately, people will not see a police officer walking around the community all the time, because that's just not possible now with the change in our crime trends and our crime types. And then if I move on to the next one, if that's okay, if I've answered your question okay around that. So in terms of hate crime, so we obviously have 80 hate crime ambassadors, hate crime reporting centres, but if anyone had any concerns around hate crime, then obviously they can report those matters online on the Essex Police website. They can contact our community policing team. They obviously can call 101, or if it was an emergency, then 999, and we'd attend, and our community policing team investigate hate crime. And if that was risk assessed as high risk, then our CID department would investigate that. But obviously, we're not hate crime. Obviously, we want to investigate that. We also want to raise awareness around that, so that and through our IAG, we discuss hate crime, etc., so that we can, as a community, try and bring the level of hate crime down. So I hope I've answered your question there.
Yeah. Inspector, thank you very much indeed. Councillor McCarthy, you content?
Very much so. Thank you, Chief Inspector.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Harris, and then we'll go to Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you. I think one of my questions has already been covered by Councillor McCarthy, and I think that was good. He and I were thinking along similar lines. But my 2 questions, one is about the commending work of the next chapter and the challenges to the domestic violence, etc. And I just wondered whether, I'm sure the answer is yes, but whether Next Chapter and their colleagues work in partnership with the safeguarding boards, both children and adults, and whether they work with the wonderful work that the Essex and Family Centres do in Beerchurch and in Grinstead across Colchester, and support families in that way. I'm sure the answer is yes, but I wondered if we could just tease that out a bit more. One question about was mentioned twice by two speakers, Chair, is about mental health, and I wondered a question to those speakers whether they use the services of Mind, who are in my ward and absolutely do a sterling job for people and supporting through mental health through Colchester. The third question, Chair, is just to the Police Chief Inspector about neighbourhood reporting antisocial behaviours, whether they can do it anonymously, whether you can share on here whether they can do that anonymously, because there's a lot of fear about reporting, not just COVID break incidences, but other ASB. There's a fear of repercussions next door to next door, etc., and whether the police will take that information anonymously. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Beverly Jones first, then we'll go to the Chief Inspector on the mental health and social. I think probably the social antisocial behaviour has been answered, but it's the anonymous bit, wasn't it, really? Okay, Beverly Jones.
So thank you. So if I've remembered correctly, Councillor Harris, you were asking about safeguarding initially in terms of children and adults, and clearly everything that we do, we work with the safeguarding teams. We make probably more referrals than we would like to be making in terms of particularly with children. We don't make so many adult safeguarding referrals, but particularly in terms of children, and we work very closely, and they offer a brilliant service as well, because they offer the ability to gain advice as well, and a little bit of guidance about how to deal with particular cases. And we work very, very closely with Children's Social Care and Essex Children and Family Services. I can't tell you specifically whether we work out of the particular areas that or venues that you've talked about. Clearly, lots of what we do at the moment is quite limited because of COVID and because of places being closed. But I know that our children and young people's services are just in the process of risk assessing a number of community locations so that we can start going out and offering our one-to-one therapeutic support. So I'm absolutely sure through our work with children and families teams and with Family Solutions that will be coming out to children's centres that are very local to us. I think you also asked about whether we use Mind in terms of support for mental health. We absolutely do. We try and get hold of every bit of resource that we can refer our clients into. I think it's worth pointing out that some of the there are some delays in terms of waiting lists for support. So I think that's where we struggle really in terms of being able to get timely support around mental health, particularly support for mental health that works in the same time frame as the support that we're providing to clients. I think it's fair to say from an acute perspective, we do struggle with some of that acute mental health where sometimes we find it difficult to engage with the NHS provision and find ourselves on the end of an emergency line, which isn't always the best response. I'm thinking particularly about our recovery refuge, where we quite often will have women who end up in a form of psychosis, and then we're looking at very serious need for intervention in terms of mental health. But absolutely, in terms of community support, we do use Mind. I can't remember whether there was anything else.
I think that was it. Well done. Very comprehensive reply there. Just before we go to the Chief Inspector, I'm going to go to Pam Donnelly because you might be coming in on this particular point, Pam.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair, because I wanted to alert us all really to the fact that we have on the call this evening colleagues from both Essex Children's and Families. Lee Bailey, who's a very active partner in One Colchester, and we appreciate that. He may be able to add some value, additional comment. And secondly, we also have now Pam Green, who, although won't necessarily have the detail around acute mental health, will be able to offer a or perspective if invited. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Everyone's invited to add if they wish to, but I'll go electronic hands because I just want to make sure people do want to contribute. So if either of those two people would like to say something, and you don't have to, but if you'd like to, please use your electronic hand. In the meantime, I'll go to the Chief Inspector, I think particularly around what work made on mental health, which you referenced in your presentation, Chief Inspector, and also I think we had a question around anonymity when reporting antisocial behaviour. Chief Inspector.
Okay, so in terms of antisocial behaviour, residents could report matters not only to the police but to the CSP on the website there and the council around ASB. But in terms of the police service, on our online, they report matters in. We obviously need to know the information to be able to, even if people didn't support a prosecution, so to say, we would need to have that information and intelligence to enable to deploy our resources into the relevant areas and also support the community there. So it might be that they might not want to be directly involved, but we might be able to, for example, if it was drugs related, we might be able to take other actions without involving those residents based on the information and intelligence that we were given. And in terms of mental health, yes, I believe the teams are linked in with Mind. I alluded to in my presentation that we're commencing in partnership with Health a SIM role for an officer to work with frequent users who suffer from mental health and try and use a police and health problem-solving approach to tackle and help those individuals.
Inspector, thank you very much indeed. And Pam Green has indeed put her hand up. Pam, I understand you were busy with the vaccination programme earlier, so you were slightly late in joining. Can I just take this opportunity on behalf of colleagues to thank you and the many of numerous colleagues that are making that vaccination programme work so successfully in Colchester. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. It's an honour and a pleasure to be able to roll out such a vaccine programme, and you know, none of this could have been achieved without the partnerships that we've got in the local community and across our alliance. So equally, I throw that straight back, that gratitude to everybody that's supported us as well. I'd just like to make a comment on the mental health approach with the domestic violence. I think it's something that we've struggled to get our hands around, so to speak, and I think what I'd like to do is take the action to work with Beverly to look at how we can provide a more reactive response for her team, because and Lee will concur, but the degree of impact it has on the whole family gives, obviously, if we can get immediate response to reduce that mental health presentation and support the family, that has a massive impact for the long-term enduring mental health of that whole unit. So happy to take that as an action from this meeting and work with Beverly and mental health colleagues.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very good of you. Councillor Harris, are you content?
Very much so. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Councillor Barber, then followed by Councillor Hogg. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair, and just to reiterate all the thanks that everyone's said this evening. It's great to see so many partners here saying out your work, in particular Chief Inspector and Beverly for your presentations as well this evening. My first question is on the rural crime strategy, which, if I recall, was launched in 2017, I think, and just to receive an update, I guess, from the partnership as to the work that's being done within rural areas, I guess, within the framework of that strategy, and anything in particular the partnerships picked up on that has changed regarding crime in the rural areas. I would say I do feel a big change that has occurred, particularly over the last, I haven't been elected for that long, but in the last couple of years, the communication flows between various organisations and local communities has improved drastically, which has helped resolve quite a few issues in my area I represent, I'm sure similarly elsewhere across the borough. So I think the engagement side, Councillor McCarthy mentioned about visible policing, but even as the Chief Inspector said, visible policing, I guess, changes now. So even just having an email address that we can contact police on and be able to raise issues, I think has been a significant game changer in tackling small issues, and the engagement of the parish councils has been excellent. But your thoughts on that would be welcome. On the speeding issue, I spoke to a councillor from Tennant district who mentioned about TrueCam and whether the partnership thinks there's any merit in using that technology to improve tackling speeding in the local areas, and what that involved for those who aren't aware, if it's much different from Speedwatch 2, which there's quite a few active Speedwatch teams in my area I represent. Thirdly, sorry, this isn't addressed to anyone actually in particular, so if anyone, these questions in general, so if anyone can assist, that'd be great, thank you. But this one is on unlawful encampments. I've always found a bit of a tricky area within the framework of criminal law, and often falls within the civil sphere, but the government was planning on changing the law on that, and I was just wondering whether anybody did have an update on the progress on that front. So I think that would be very useful. It's been quite a big issue in my communities over the last few years. Another issue on changes to law is on the legal.
Councillor Barber, should we just hold it there because it's 3, and I think it's a lot for people to remember if we carry on.
All right,
I'll come back to you
okay.
in a second. So I think, colleagues, if we're doing more than 3 questions, that's fine, but just I think we can't do it all at once because people start to lose the thread. Right. I think certainly the first 2, maybe the third one, and I don't know if Mr. Hurst wishes to comment on unlawful encampments, because I know you have done quite a bit of work, particularly in the west of the county on that. Chief Inspector, can I come to you first, and we'll go to Mr. Hurst.
Yes, so I believe the first question was around rural crime and the strategy around that. So locally we have Operation Vocal, which is our response to rural crime and rural visibility across the districts. The main concerns that our rural community raise is in fact around road safety, so speeding, etc. We're obviously linked in with the parish councils and the parish clerks regularly to try and understand the issues there around what's going on in the community there. We obviously have our rural engagement team, which are a centrally based team, but they link in with the farming community, deal with traveller encampments, unlawful encampments, etc., hare coursing. So we're very much linked in with the rural community around these issues. In terms of Colchester, I think we've increased visibility across the rural community. I think we have dealt with the issues raised by the community. So if it was a volume crime issue, it'd be dealt with as business as usual. If it's a crime pattern, then our community policing team would have a look at that and do a problem solving approach around that, linking in with our community. We've obviously increased our neighbourhood watch through the partnership out in Wivenhoe and across the rural community. So we do have visibility there, and we do listen to the community and tackle the issues as and when they come up. Obviously, we can't be in every district all the time, and that's the reality of policing. I hope I've answered your question. And secondly, TrueCam, I have that as a district resource for Colchester policing. So we've got officers trained with TrueCam, and we do use that across the district to help with road safety issues.
Thank you. Mr. Hurst.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bentley. So I'll just pick up. I think the Chief Inspector has obviously dealt well with the rural crime strategy, and of course, as Councillor Barber mentioned, it was launched in 2017. I think it's been a real success. We will, I'm sure, be reviewing it after it's been in place for about 4 years, as it has now. We'll give it a refresh. But just coming specifically to the questions that you asked. So one, around TrueCam, as the Chief Inspector rightly pointed out, that is available to policing here. But I think I'm probably right in guessing that Councillor Barber was actually referring to the pilot where the Community Speed Watch, Neighbourhood Watch, I think, in Harwich was kitted out with TrueCam. I have to say, Councillor, it's not been an overwhelming success. Actually, what we've discovered is it hasn't gone down too well, and actually the success of Community Speed Watch is really as an educational and preventative tool rather than as an enforcement tool. So having accredited officers of the council, which is one thing we did in Malden using TrueCam, did work. They, I think, were seen as enforcement professionals. But I'm afraid that giving it to Community Speed Watch rather set Community Speed Watch against the community. And it's not something that we'll be rolling out elsewhere across the county. I think Community Speed Watch really, and I'm a Community Speed Watch volunteer myself here in Brentwood where I live. It really works in terms of slowing traffic down, and it really works in terms of getting that educational message through to drivers who have been found to be speeding through the letters that are sent out to them. Obviously, we need to get it ramped up again post-lockdown, and we will. But I think that let's focus on it in those terms rather than trying to make Community Speed Watch into an enforcement tool, which it's not good at doing. The other part that you asked, Councillor Bentley, was around unlawful encampments. Perhaps worth making the point that since the rural engagement team that the Chief Inspector mentioned has been in place, we've actually halved the number of unlawful encampments across the county. That's at least in part to do with the protocol that we worked on with you and with the other councils across the county. It may be worth refreshing our memories about that, because it is a very good way of laying out how we most effectively intervene where there is unlawful and then criminal activity in terms of encampments and encroachments on private or public land. And it's very effective. But equally well, perhaps just also worth mentioning that I, together with the MPs across the county, have been very active in lobbying for aggravated trespass to be made into a criminal act, which is not at the moment. It's enforced through the civil courts. My understanding is that that actually will be part of the Courts and Sentencing Bill, which is due to be put in front of the House of Commons, I believe, in a matter of weeks.
Mr. Hurst, thank you very much indeed. Very good explanations from Councillor Barber. Back to you.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for those answers there. My final two questions, Chair, are firstly just on an update regarding illegal parking, because there were plans to shift the responsibility towards local authorities to enforce rather than, well, I guess in a way, from the police to local authorities. I don't know whether that still be classed technically as illegal. But then finally, my question was just for Beverly. I noted at the end of your report, which was excellent, by the way, thank you for that. There was reference to, in a way, what you'd like to see more of the, sorry, it was within healthcare settings. And there was a piece on there about GPs and where funding has been available and not necessarily taking up perhaps the offer. Sorry, I've gone off the page. Effectively, could you just elaborate a bit more on what you'd like to see in these healthcare settings and maybe why it hasn't been rolled out in the GP services despite the funding opportunities? Thank you.
Just before we go to Beverly Jones and then maybe the Chief Inspector, Councillor Michael Lilly's got his hand in there. That might be around illegal parking. Councillor Lilly?
Yeah, it is about the legal parking as a member of the NEP. The NEP around North Essex, we've got our policy in place. We're ready to do it, but we're just waiting for the bill to be passed through Parliament. It seems to be taking forever and ever. It's probably 2 years now since we first spoke about it, but as soon as that comes through, we'll take that up and we'll be looking at the policy that will come out. As I've said before in the past, it'll be down to individual councillors and their wards to put forward streets that they want to be excluded from the overall ban. Because you know yourself, Birch, Lair, all these places, Rowhedge, they're chock-a-block for, and it works well at the moment. But if you want to ban parking everywhere, all of the whole borough, you're going to have an almighty crash. So we're not going to do that. We're going to take it to the local ward councillors. They'll put forward roads that they want to be excluded, that they believe is an asset, and then we'll take it from there. But we're ready to go, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lilly. I perhaps would, when the time comes, engage with parish councillors as well.
Absolutely, yes.
As well as good you're coming to the borough council too. I think actually it's an amendment to an existing bill, isn't it? Because at the moment London has the authority to do this, so it's to amend it to the rest of the country. I think
No, you're correct.
Very useful, very useful. Thank you. Beverly Jones. I don't think we can hear you. You're definitely there, and you're not muted, I don't think. Sometimes this happens, I know.
No, can you hear me?
Got it. Yes, we got you.
Ah, brilliant. I tried wiggling things, like, you know, I don't know whether that did anything. Councillor Barber, thank you for your question. Yes, I did pop something right at the very end of my report, just really to flag where we felt was the next place that we should be looking to extend our services. And this really relates to some work that we did. It was a few years ago now when I very first joined what was Colchester and Tendring Women's Refuge. We had an externally funded project that it was Comic Relief and a range of other funds that had come forward to enable us to have what was termed as health advisors, so independent domestic violence advisors who deal with high risk victims of domestic abuse. And we had them based in Colchester General. We had 2 practitioners who worked with the safeguarding team in the hospital. And the work that they did was really, really valuable. It took them probably 18 months to bed themselves into the safeguarding team and into the workings of the hospital, so that they were known by the hospital staff and the practitioners there. But by the time the funding ran out, they were taking on average 70 referrals a week from the wards in Colchester Hospital, principally around the maternity and children's services and some A&E. But unfortunately, the funding ran out. We didn't have any more funding that we could put in. We've tried a kind of a halfway approach in terms of putting some of our community practitioners on into Colchester Hospital on a 1 or 2 days a week basis, but they had other jobs that they needed to do and couldn't be focused entirely on supporting the safeguarding team and referrals or disclosures that came out of that setting. So we found that actually the efficiency of them working dropped, and we got to the stage where we were getting really no referrals coming out of that particular setting. And we know that it wasn't that there weren't any victims that could have been seen there or disclosures made, but it was just that our practitioners weren't there on a regular enough basis for the nursing staff or the doctors to be able to know that there was somewhere for that to go. And actually, Pam Donnelly and I have only just had a conversation the end of last week, which Pam Green, I'm so sorry, your name's in the frame again, that I was going to get in touch with you to see if we could have a conversation about whether there was an opportunity to look at health advisors in a hospital setting again. We've sat on this because clearly COVID and the pressures that our NHS have been under, and now the vaccination programme, really have taken a priority over us trying to pursue this avenue. But I think now it looks like we've got some light at the end of the tunnel. I think that this is, an area that we should be looking at in terms of a place that's really important to have domestic abuse practitioners. We know from research that often health professionals are the most likely professionals where disclosures will be made. They're the most trusted professionals, and I can completely understand why. So they're in a unique position to be able to identify and warm handle people into our services so that we can pick up that support. And just quickly, in terms of the GP project, we had a very small amount of funding that was provided to us by our North East Essex CCG to enable us to engage with a pilot cohort of GP surgeries to provide a practitioner to work out of those GP surgeries, to train the staff, to help them see the red flags and to have somewhere to pass those disclosures that may be made onto. But despite going to GP forums, doing our very best to engage with the representatives from the GP surgeries in North East Essex, we haven't had any take up. There was very, very little interest, and I'm not entirely sure that I can give you a reason why. And then of course, COVID pandemic happened. GP surgeries have pretty much closed to people going in there and sitting in waiting rooms. So the ability for us to have the sort of impact that we think we could have by being present in a GP surgery is really negated at the moment. So we're sitting on the funding and we're waiting till stuff opens up again, and then we'll try again to engage to try and get some GP surgeries online with us.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Barber, are you content?
I'm done. I'm very content. Thank you,
Good,
everyone.
thank you. We'll go then to Councillor Hogg, followed by Councillor Hayter. Councillor Hogg.
Good evening. Thank you. First of all, a question and a comment to Beverly Jones, if I may. First of all, thank you for all the work that you and your partners are doing. In the report, some very scary stats in there. One of the scariest things, if I heard you right, you said that only 30 to 40% will report the crime of domestic abuse. Well, of course, it is a crime, but I'm of an age to remember back, having been brought up in the 40s and 50s, when domestic abuse was seen as all part of the rough and tumble of family life. Thank goodness we've moved on from that. What concerns me is that you have all these extra referrals, which are not going to go away. Once you've unpacked them, you can't then pack them away. They have to be seen through to the to a conclusion and supported. And this is in no way political. How confident are you? And you've just touched a bit on GPs surgeries there. How confident are you that you can resource this going forward, and we're not going to have referrals which are sort of left on the shelf due to the fact we don't have the resources to see them through? That's my question through to Beverly, if I may, and then I have one for Chief Inspector.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Hogg. Beverly Jones.
Right, they are scary, scary numbers that we are dealing with. To give you some sort of comfort, we are incredibly lucky that we are the commission providers for Mid and North Essex, and as a result of that, we have constant conversations with our commissioners, which are Essex County Council and the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner and their representative Kirsty, who works with us. We have been very lucky to secure emergency COVID funding through the government and through the Ministry of Justice. And we are having conversations. In fact, I'm meeting with Kirsty tomorrow morning to talk about two strands of funding which are coming on stream. One is some Ministry of Justice funding, which Kirsty knows how much money she's got, and there's a whole piece of work that's going on to work with commissioned and non-commissioned providers in terms of understanding what that need is, and then she's got the incredibly difficult job to try and work and sift through that need to try and use that funding to her very best ability. So I'm very confident that whilst we may not get everything that we think we need, Kirsty is very fair in terms of the proposal that she puts forward to Roger in terms of how she uses that funding, and I'm confident that we will certainly get a proportion of that funding that will enable us to continue supporting victims. And I know that there is a longer term, wider conversation that we're having around some additional funding that the government have made available, which is to specifically support the extension of IDVA services, taking into account the pandemic and the rise in referrals that we've had. So I think there are two proposals coming forward that certainly give us comfort that there are some additional resources that we can tap into. The second one, we don't know quite what that looks like, but it's for us to put our case forward in terms of the need and the numbers so that can be calculated.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hogg, your second question.
Well, thank you for that, and we wish you fair wind in your negotiations with future funding. Thank you very much for that. My question to Chief Inspector Evans is regards to the linkage between county lines and youth. Priorities 1 and 2 in the report. We have only yesterday a group of youngsters through Colchester, through Essex Boys and Girls Clubs, 55 families working with 115 youngsters, doing great work, asking for support, getting support, good work being done by Essex Boys and Girls Clubs in Colchester with the blessing of Essex County Council. All very good stuff. That's the good side of it. The bad side of it is the group of youngsters that we don't catch, who then go on to work in county lines, and we lose them. So I'm very concerned about any loss or diminution of the linkage between what the police are doing on county lines and youth work and youth facilities locally and Essex-wide. Could I be assured that the seriousness of this will be taken on board?
So thank you. I will go to the Chief Inspector, but I'd like to invite Mr. Hurst to comment. I know he's had a lot to do with county lines and the strategy behind that. Before I do any of that, I have noticed Pam Green's hand is in the air, and she may want to come in on a previous point. Pam, did you want to add anything at this stage before I then move to the Chief Inspector?
Yeah, it was about the matters raised around the support from GP practices. So if I can suggest that Lee Bailey, as our lead for children's and families, works with Beverly again to see what we can do around end of year funding, to see if there's anything that we can, if it is funding related, around the support to the hospital. Or alternatively, I think we've had to prioritise the suicide reduction training for our GPs for obvious reasons in the forthcoming GP training. But if Beverly can alert me to, I think what we need to do is take a place-based approach. So if for those practices where the highest level of domestic violence is occurring, we will then build that into their community support offer. And I think, again, Lee's been very instrumental in how we develop the place-based approach in Colchester. So I think we could take that through the children's group that he leads. So if we can work it on that basis, I think Beverly could help us.
Thank you very much indeed. And the thumbs up there from Beverly as well, which is great news. And Lee, is Lee got his, no, he's not got his hand up. He's collecting a lot of work tonight. So he's listening to all this. Right, let me go back to Councillor question, first of all, to the Chief Inspector, then I'll go to Mr. Hurst, who I think has been quite involved in the strategy of county funds across the county, but Chief Inspector, specifically in Colchester.
Okay, in terms of Colchester then, the need to safeguard our vulnerable children and vulnerable communities not obviously lost. Obviously, we've got the element of tackling county lines, but we also need to educate and raise awareness around county lines activity. Our CYP offices, as I've said, alluded to before, are linked in with youth clubs, care homes, and the secondary schools and also junior schools. Obviously, COVID has caused us to have some difficulties for face-to-face contact and engagement activity around this area. Once obviously youth clubs are back online, etc., the councillor's got my word that we'll be engaging with these youth clubs and etc. To raise awareness around county lines, also to raise awareness for parents of children around county lines and spot the signs, etc. We're working with our safety partnership around educating businesses around county lines, CSC and CE. So he's got my assurance that we obviously taken it very seriously and will work to raise awareness.
Inspector, thank you very much indeed. Let me go to Mr. Hurst, who has been involved in this strategy. Mr. Hurst.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley, and thank you very much indeed, Chief Inspector, for that excellent description of what's actually going on here on the ground in Colchester. Maybe just worth making everyone aware of the fact that we have county-wide a violence and vulnerability strategy and a violence and vulnerability board, which I chair, which brings together all of those partners at a level to make sure that we are continuing to commission services to do exactly what Councillor Hogg was asking for. So I think it's just worth stressing that the battle against county lines is effectively three-pronged. One is at the very hard end, where our Serious Crime Directorate work with the regional serious crime units and forces like the Met and West Midlands Police to do what the Prime Minister has called chopping the head off the snake. So dealing with the very serious criminals who make the big money out of this. I've seen a number of those now being brought to book. Then there is very much the surge activity by police on the ground here in Essex, which is both the stop and search and OPSEPTA, OPRAPTA interventions that the Chief Inspector was mentioning earlier. I think in the last 2 weeks, we've actually made 44 arrests of operatives acting in county lines, drug dealers who are operating in our county. That's a pretty decent number for a couple of weeks. And we've been using some additional Home Office funding there to make that work better. And then there's the piece which is very much apart with what the Chief Inspector was just describing, which is making sure that we have programs in place to support and protect and safeguard young people on whom these county lines gangs prey. So Assistant Chief Constable Prophet is chair of our operations board, and he is very much coordinating the stuff that the Chief Inspector was describing. But we also have involved in the strategic board the County Council, Children's and Young People's Services. We also have the schools. We have representatives of both the primary and secondary schools. We have the health service, again, acute trusts and CCGs. And we have the voluntary sector. So actually the head of the Essex Boys and Girls Clubs on our board and very much involved. We channel about £2 million a year into providing services that go, on the one hand, to give young people something better to do than being part of the county line. And that can be things like Essex Boys and Girls Clubs. It can be interventions at schools, where we've particularly targeted schools with exclusion problems and actually reduced exclusions by 80% in those schools we've targeted. It's also, I think, just working more broadly with detached youth groups who can reach out to people that we otherwise wouldn't reach, but also specific educational programs for kids who are going wrong and actually mentoring for kids who have gone wrong. How do we get hold of them? Well, we've actually been operating in the A&E departments and have someone there who picks up on kids who have been stabbed, so clearly are part of the gang crime world, and explain to them that there is a way out, because so often they think there isn't, but there is. And it's being really successful so far. We've just learned we've got funding from the government again to do a third year of this. We're in the middle of the second year now. So I think it's a really exciting program that will help protect kids in your area. And I think very much plays to the question that Councillor Hogg was asking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hogg, are you content?
Yeah, I am indeed content that things are in good hands.
Lovely, thank you. Now, colleagues,
Thank you.
it's certainly gone 9:30. Normally I would ask just the panelists if they would like to take a break. We have a lot of people on the call tonight. Some people doing more talking than others. I'm conscious that sitting and watching and listening is quite intensive and tiring as well. So I'm going to propose we have a 5-minute break so we can have a cup of tea and just take a break from the screen. Could I ask you please to switch your cameras off, your microphones off, and to come back just before 10:02, if that's okay, back before 10:02. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues.
Can't hear you, Chairman.
Welcome back, colleagues. Good to see everyone back here. Thank you for coming back so promptly. Mr. Howell, can I check the recording and live stream is back in place, please?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman. Just have a quick
Lovely,
check. It looks like, yes, it is.
Good, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let's resume then, colleagues. We'll go to Councillor Hayter, followed by Councillor Dundas. Councillor Hayter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got one question, but also it's tied in with a little bit of information that goes back to a couple of the questions some of the panel asked earlier. One is the main is the concern about the footfall and presence of officers around the community. Now, I've had a slightly different experience of this in the last few months in a positive, where I've built very good relationships with the PCSOs and PCs on my ward, with feedback going back and forth in regarding to hotspots in the area, whether it be by email, by phone, and it's worked really well. And I have to say, in the 2.5 years that I have been a councillor, the communication at the moment with the local force in regard to this, of any potential problems or actual issues, has been really good. I like the change of tactic. I like the communication. I get emails backed up, phone calls backed up when these actions have happened. And it's reassuring for the residents, because what I do like is the thoughtful process that if you're going to have someone out on foot, it's communicated to where the best areas are in that ward, because they might not know the area as well as I do or a colleague does. And I think that works really well. Going forward, is this something that we can continue doing and that you're planning on continuing doing on building those community links? Because I feel, it's a positive thing at the moment.
Thank you. Chief Inspector, well, good praise there for your officers.
Thank you. Yes, of course so. Obviously, the new community safety engagement officers have been instrumental in responding to communications with the community and councillors and the parishes, etc. And then obviously all our deployments have to be evidence-based. So if there's evidence of foul play or ASB, etc., then obviously we'd like to deploy to those hotspot areas based on the information intelligence community providing us. So yes, we're hoping to improve our communications. So I'm glad to hear that it's good already, but we're still working on that. It's a work in progress.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes, are you content?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Dundas, followed by Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everybody for your very good contribution so far. I've got 3 questions, if that's all right. I'll do them in one go. They're quite short. Firstly, I guess this is probably, you can only really give a subjective answer to this, that said at the beginning that drug-related offences are up 26%, I think. Do we think they're actually up 26%, or is it a case that, particularly during the lockdown periods, they're just being observed a lot more and reported a lot more? I've certainly noticed locally that they've been pushed into more visible areas, whereas a lot of the sort of places where perhaps drug sales used to happen aren't available. So they've ended up in places where you don't see them normally. And to put it simply, it's much easier to notice drugs being sold out the back of a car in an empty car park than a car park with 300 cars in it. So that's my first question. My second question is around the COVID marshals, which Councillor Lilly gave an answer on earlier. When the and I'm pleased to hear that they are, covering the borough and getting out to places like Wivenhoe and that. When the town centre does reopen, or the shops reopen, which hopefully will be in the spring, obviously I appreciate that probably the main emphasis will be back on the town centre because that's where most of our shops are. But our other urban centres have also got shops, and they have also got a nighttime economy. It's smaller, but it definitely exists. Can you reassure us that the other urban areas won't be totally forgotten? That they will get out there from time to time and help the shops reopen and see what's going on. And my third sort of question, we touched earlier on mental health and suicides. Colchester has a very, very high suicide rate. I think on the latest statistics, it's the third highest in the country. Only Tendring and Torbay are higher. But what's noticeable about Colchester is that we are very much out of kilter with similar areas with similar sort of socio-economic statistics. We are out of line with our peers in terms of deprivation and various other factors. I'm just wondering if anybody would like to comment on what they feel the main reason for that is.
Okay, so let's go to the first question first, if we may, and I'll ask the Chief Inspector about the offences around drugs. I don't know whether Mr. Hurst wants to comment on the policy side of that, but that's entirely up to you. Let me know if you want to. But Chief Inspector.
So I think you're quite right in terms of, yes, it's up 26%. Obviously, as the current district commander for Colchester, we will only record drug-related activity if we find people in possession of drugs, etc. So, as a result of the additional proactivity, it's generated an increase in the recording of drug-related offences. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword, really. So whilst it looks like it's up 26%, we've obviously apprehended 26% more offenders. So, and you're quite right. The lockdown has made individuals stick out like a sore thumb. So hence why there's been an increase in that. So, and our units are able to link in with the community, provide reassurance, and also obviously take enforcement action that the community are telling us is required. So does that answer the first question for you?
Yes, Councillor Dunn is indicating. I just wondered, and Mr. Hurst, you don't have to, but if you want to comment on the policy side of that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chief Inspector has given a very good summary, but as I said, it is because we are having a particular focus both on working with the potential victims of the drugs trade and on those who perpetrate it. But I think it's perhaps just worth noting that whilst overall drug offences are up by 26%, actually offences in the trafficking of drugs, we have caught 47% more people this year than last year. And that, as the Chief Inspector accurately says, is because of proactive intervention. So OpSector, which we have some extra funding for, was launched last June. I believe it's now nearly 30 county lines rolled up since it was launched. And that is, we're finding people because we are using the intelligence that we have to target them and to take them out and to roll up their activities. So the policy is very much that three-pronged policy I was talking about, making sure that we can safeguard people. We can actually, we have drug support programs as well, drug and alcohol teams across the county. We spend around £400,000 a year in helping people get off addiction. But more importantly, I think, is the work we're doing right now to stop them getting on it. But very important is the work we're doing to roll up those gangs. Those figures would not be up if it weren't for police activity.
Mr. Hurst, thank you very much indeed. Now I've got Pam Don and Councillor Michael Lilly, presumably on the second 2 points. Councillor Lilly, let's come to you first, then we'll go to Pam.
Okay, well, it's probably actually on all 3 points, to be fair.
Okay,
on the subject of the marshals, Charlotte Williams is on here. She's an officer. She's actually in charge of the marshals. I do apologise. I didn't realise she was on the call earlier. Otherwise, so I'll let Charlotte take the question with the marshals. I had a meeting with Acting Chief Inspector Evans yesterday, and the subject come up about what we're going to do when the town does reopen, and in fact everybody reopens. So we will be looking at all aspects on how we can work together as a partnership in making sure everybody is open and they're safe. So there is in hand. It'll be a difficult one, but we are looking at it in that respect. The recorded drug crimes is up. Well, yeah, because I think for the last year or so, the police have been pushing the fact that everybody must record everything. We've been doing the same. And that's probably why we've had big stats in that. So we're going to be pushing on with that through Colchester Borough Homes, and we get a lot of calls from residents about CBH properties, and we'll be asking councillors if they witnessed it to make impact statements, because sometimes residents who report it, they don't want to give a statement in case they're targeted by their neighbours as such. But if councillors do witness it, then hopefully we could use that to prosecute a lot more people than what we've been doing so far. And on the Pam will talk about the mental health issues. We had a meeting this morning. I brought it up with that. It's very concerning about where we are, but we must know, we have to know who is committing suicide, the age groups. Are they different people? Are they ex-soldiers? Are they students? We've got to start somewhere, and I think we're going to be working with the NHS and finding out who the people are who have really sadly taken their own lives, and then we can work from there to see if there's any issues that are outstanding. But we are going to be working hard on that because it is a worry. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely, thank you. I can't see Charlotte on the call. I'll stand to be corrected, but I can't see her at this stage. But let me go to Pam Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. So I can just explain that Charlotte's had to leave as a result of childcare responsibilities, but she has updated me on the fact that the support of the marshals will continue borough-wide after the lockdown eases for as long as is required and the funding allows. However, I'm very happy for Charlotte to brief you separately on this, Councillor Dundas, when there's a convenient time for you to speak to her. The point I wanted to speak to the panel about was suicide prevention, because Councillor Lilly is absolutely right. He and I spoke about it this morning, and I think it's really taken over in my priorities from COVID as we get into a much more of a business as usual response with regard to the pandemic, with the vaccination programme running so well, the numbers coming down, etc. So I've switched my attention now to suicide prevention, because sadly Colchester, alongside Harlow and Tendring, feature in the top 10. It's not a league table you absolutely want to be in, and you certainly don't want to be near the top, but we are. And I was called to a meeting only last week with Dr. Mike McHugh from the Director of Public Health's office. He's an interim called in to deal specifically with this issue. And we agreed at that meeting that we share with Tendring, our partners in North East Essex, similar challenges. And we don't understand enough about this. So I can confirm that I will be representing the borough on a North East Essex suicide prevention group, which I'll be consulting with partners on this meeting and elsewhere to make sure I represent their views. But if there's one thing I'm absolutely clear about, is that we're not very clear about anything with regard to the types of individuals who sadly comprise this group. So it appears to me, and I'm just about to do some more research on this, that we have very little information about the profile. There's lots of comments around about middle-aged men being particularly at risk. Yes, there is evidence of that, but we're also seeing evidence of young women coming forward with harm-related suicides. And we're also seeing, sadly, some young men only in the last few weeks as a result of debt, So we could all make guesses, but my view is that that's not enough. This is such a serious issue that we must be absolutely crystal clear about what the issues are that are driving this group of people to take their own lives. So all I can do is just give my total commitment to support the work that's being led by the Director of Public Health on behalf of Colchester and with our colleagues in tendering, and happy to report back to this group on future meeting. If that's helpful.
Yes, I'd be grateful. Thank you, Rush, indeed, for a very full answer there. Now, Councillor Harris, you have your hand in the air. Is it on this point? Because I do have Councillor Whitehead waiting to his turn. Is it on this point? You go ahead then, please.
Yeah, it was just to endorse what Councillor Lilly said to you, Chair, just now. And we get reference to Colchester Homes and their antisocial behaviour work with the police and the courts. As far as I'm concerned, they're exemplars in this. They're doing extremely well. And I wondered if you would permit Pam to tell Colchester Homes those comments that we heard tonight and how well that they're doing, because I know I've given testimonies for Colchester Homes to back up their work to stop antisocial behaviour in their tenancies.
Councillor Harris, thank you. We'll go one better. I should, in fact, write to the record of the meeting to tell them that from the chair to them. So, and Mr. Howard will work on that together. Thank you. Right, Councillor Dundas, are you content, or do you?
I am. I think. Thank you for those answers. I think the final comment on the suicide rate. I mean, we mentioned tendering. I think what's interesting, if you look at a lot of the places which have high suicide rates, tendering does actually quite fit the profile. In many respects. What's interesting about Colchester is it doesn't, so that's why we have to be concerned about tendering obviously as well, but Colchester stands out that it doesn't fit the profile compared to our peers. So yeah, I think it's something we do need to look at urgently, and hopefully we can set a good timetable to investigate and get some statistics so we can begin to get our heads around exactly what's causing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. I've got Alison Andreas would like to come in.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alison Andreas. I'm the Principal and Chief Executive at Colchester Institute. And I just wanted to come in, if I may, on the point of suicide and mental health. Very sadly, in the almost 7 years since I've been principal, we've experienced 4 student suicides, one adult and 3 younger people between 17 and 19. And we do work with a very large number of young people who are experiencing varying degrees of mental health challenges. But I just thought the committee might be interested to know that starting in a couple of weeks' time, when I hope that we'll be returning to our campuses, we'll be joined by a new team of a small team of staff who are actually employed by Mind. They're going to be the Wellbeing and Resilience Mental Health team. This is a group that will be with us, 3 staff members with us at Colchester Institute and another 3 staff members at Colchester Sixth Form College. This is a trailblazer in Essex, and it's been supported by the local authority, by Essex County Council, and colleagues in Colchester Borough Council. And the idea is that they'll be working with our 16 to 18-year-old students on the kind of earlier referrals, so not so much the acute cases, but the very, very many young people that present with early stage mental ill health, and working with us, which will then release some of our own staff and help us to gain capacity in working with some of the more acute cases and the referrals and so on. And I can see partner Lee Bailey nodding, and I know he's been trying to come in by waving his hand, but hasn't been able to raise his hand electronically. So I don't know if he wants to. Sorry, it's not my place, but he may wish to come in.
No, I'll bring him in certainly straight away. Yes, I was conscious I saw the physical hand up a minute ago. I'll come to you in just a second, Lee. But Alison, thank you for that. Sad news at the start of your comments, but good news towards the end. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that information. Lee, sorry, I did see you earlier, but then I got lost in a myriad of other people wanting to speak. So please, the floor is yours.
That's okay. Thank you, Councillor Bentley, and apologies for all. I've been waving. What have you? My functionality is not working this evening, so I should have come in on a number of other issues, but thankfully Pam jumped in my behalf. Yes, in terms of the new support services going into the Institute and Sixth Form, that's excellent, and that's partly to the work of the wider partnership, really, in identifying where that need was. And certainly working with the Institute and Sixth Form on submitting a bid through the Clinical Commissioning Group and through partners to get that additional funding in, which is a fantastic resource. So hopefully will support some of the work going forward. But I also wanted just to highlight the work that Startwell are doing as part of the Alliance on focusing on supporting our young people who tragically feel it necessary to attempt to take their own lives. And we've had an influx of those over the past year or so, particularly presenting at the hospital. So we're undertaking a deep dive with colleagues from our Stay Safe group to look at, some level of profiling of those young people and what the circumstances led to that behaviour, and more importantly, what support they received as a consequence of being in hospital. So hopefully we'll be able in a position in probably about 6 months' time to be able to bring some of that findings to that, so we start to get a picture of what the issues are for young people and what's driving them to these significant behaviours.
Thank you, Rush, indeed. Excellent. Thank you for that information. Right, Councillor Whitehead, patiently waiting there, but and I think Councillor Barber's chasing you for your crown of getting as many questions in as possible. So, floor is yours, Councillor Whitehead.
I waited all that time, Chair, and until Councillor Dundas before having one of my questions pinched. But you'll be pleased to hear that I still have about 4, I think. I'll echo, the thanks to everyone for the presentations and reports. I think that in particular, it was really, the next chapter report was really excellent and great to have all that detail, and really lovely as well to have a bit of a report on some of the One Colchester work and the testimonies from the people who've been helped in both of those reports to really kind of bring home how powerful that work is, I think. So thank you for that. Yes, my question that was pinched was going to be around the suicide issue, and I think it'd be really, I'd really welcome it, if we can, at a future meeting, have Pam and others back to once we know a bit more maybe about the causes, because I think there's stuff in the report around the sort of crisis intervention stuff, and maybe once we know more about the causes, there's other actions as well that might be able to be taken. On a related issue, I notice on page, where are we? Page 44 of the report, it mentions about the use of section 135 warrants, and there's a big increase in the use of section 135 warrants. 2017 it's 28 up to 111, 2018 147, 156 by 2020. I know there's a note in the report saying that there's the 2017 figure has to be taken with a bit of caution because difference in the way it was reported or something like that, but still a big rise between 2018 and 2020 is about a 50% rise. So I'm just wondering, do we know why that we're seeing such a big rise there in the use of those kinds of warrants? That's my first question. My second question is, so it notes early in the report at 13.1 that we expect funding to decrease. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. But I'm wondering on that more general point, do we know how much we're expecting funding to decrease by insofar as it impacts on the work of the teams here? And what do we anticipate to be the impact of that loss of funding to the work of the partnership? And I might pause there, Chair, maybe.
Yes, I think it's very good. I'll go to the Chief Inspector first, then perhaps Councillor Lilly to speak on behalf of the administration on funding, or he may wish to put that to an officer to answer. And I think, Chief Inspector, just for the sake of people who may watch this now or later, just explain the 135 warrant, just so everyone understands what that is. But if you could pick that one up, please.
Chair, I think this question's better directed at health for 135 warrants in terms of mental health warrant.
Okay.
So obviously we would assist healthcare professionals with executing the warrant with our policing powers. In terms of why that has increased, that I don't think that sits with my portfolio.
Nope, that's fine, Chief Inspector, thank you. I would need someone to volunteer to answer the question then from our mental health colleagues, or Pam maybe, to help guide us on this.
Pam Donnelly has a rate.
Yes, I can see.
Shall I come in, Councillor Bentley?
Yes, no, please do, yes.
So I seem to be losing all my people because Pam Green's also had to leave just at this crucial moment, who would have a better understanding of the role of Section 135 warrants, but they are warrants for the benefit of the audience at home and listening later, that allow the police to enter a home and take you to a place of safety so that a mental health assessment can be done. So that's what they are. But I'm afraid I cannot speak on behalf of health to explain, even if they know the answer, why there has been such an increase. But I can take an action to go away and find out and report back to the committee.
Could you do that? And I think maybe write to the committee if that's all right.
Of course I will.
That's very kind, thank you. But Mr. Hurst has his hand up.
Well, I'm just going to say part of the answer, and obviously I don't have my head around your local statistics here, but part of the answer is that 4 years ago, there was a complete dearth of mental health-based places of safety in the county. And one of the things that actually my deputy, Jane Garden, did was bring together the various different health partners and policing partners and safeguarding partners and improve the provision. So there wasn't much point in exercising a warrant when there was no place of safety to take them. And I think actually we were ending up with far too many people in police cells who had mental health-based problems. Now those S135 warrants can be exercised, and just given the time frame that the councillor gave us, I think it's entirely coincident with there being better provision of mental health-based places of safety. So it may simply be that we could, is part of the answer.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, the question of funding, can I go to Councillor Lilly, if you're able to answer that, or maybe ask an officer, or maybe come back with a written reply later?
I'm not sure which sort of funding Lorcan is talking about in respect of that, because if it's the council community safety fund, and we hardly have anything in that at all. And when we have projects and campaigns, anything that we want to run, we actually apply to Roger's crime commissioner funding, and he usually helps us out in that respect. So that's the funding where we get that from in there. But if it's a funding for the partnership, then obviously there's different people with different funds in there, the NHS. So I think that if you could write a more clearer question, Councillor Whitehead, for us, where the funding are. I mean, we would love to have loads of funds in public safety as such, but we run things with our partners and such. So it's a difficult one to answer in that respect. But I think you see where, but we'll try and get a written answer to you.
It is very rare that Councillor White is nothing but clear in his questions. However, it might be if we run this through Mr. Howell to ask if you can ask that way, and that way all the committee can then see both the question and the response. But Councillor White, we're back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the responses. Two more questions I think I have. So the first is for Bev. She's still here, yes. So you mentioned, Bev, in one of your responses that one of the sort of upsides of the recent situation is the pandemic has raised the profile of the issue. So I'm just wondering if you think that there are ways that can or will be maintained after the pandemic's over. Are there ways to keep that the profile of the issue higher and kind of build on that sort of opportunity, really, to do that? That's one of my questions. And the other one is, well, I guess I'd just like to hear maybe a bit more about, maybe from Lee or someone else, about what we're doing around young people. I noticed, in the report, it makes reference to our strategic plan, and it talks about, specifically key goals, including providing positive opportunities for young people to engage with their local community, do things that interest them, keep them safe, makes them happy, and supports improved mental well-being. So maybe just to hear a little bit more about what kinds of things are happening there, and also how the disruption of COVID has maybe impacted that side of things as well.
Thank you. Beverly Jones first, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really interesting question that you've posed, and one that we're really keen to make sure that we can grasp every opportunity to make sure that the profile stays raised. I think, like lots of things in terms of the pandemic, I don't think that that the future will remain untouched by the past year that we've just experienced. And I think that there's been a huge amount of interest and light shone on a subject that people perhaps didn't know as much about. So I think that the level of interest that has been raised, both in terms of the public, our community, the media, our local politicians and national politicians, I think this has given us a profile that we can maintain. The contacts that we have with local media mean that actually they've come to us and said, we'd really like to come back and talk to you. We'd like to understand what it looks like when you come out of the pandemic. We'd like to come and see you. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity around that. I think there's other platforms as well that we have gained support on. So our social media platforms, we've had to raise our game in terms of how we approach and put our stuff out there, so that people in the community who need to get access to us and need silent access to information, support, and the ability to contact us means that we've got web chat, we've got blog series, we've got a greater amount of social media channels. So we've got a whole range of things that aren't going to go away when the pandemic hopefully recedes and we get back to whatever bits of normality we want to retain going forward. And I hope that we don't go back to where we were, but like you, Ivan, I hope that we continue that crest of awareness, and we certainly will be doing our bit. But I think that we've got lots of foundations now that we didn't have before. And of course, we've got the domestic abuse bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment. That hopefully will become legislation on the 1st of April, come into force. And I think that gives us another platform to build on more conversations about responsibilities and responses, and particularly bringing children in as recognised victims of domestic abuse. So I think there's lots there that we can keep building on.
Thank you. Lee, can I come to you for the second question?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. So in terms of our most vulnerable, absolutely a great deal of work is going on in place in a partnership arena around our most vulnerable young people who are either at risk of sexual exploitation or criminal exploitation. And that's through our multi-agency child exploitation groups, or MACE, as you might have heard them referred to. I know Chief Inspector Evans sits on that along with a number of colleagues, and we meet on a monthly basis to discuss first and foremost individual cases and what wraparound services we can put in place for those, but also looking at the wider community safeguarding element and how we can broach particular hotspots or areas of concern, and what service provision we can collectively put in together to support that. So a lot of that work would be working with the police and working with the youth service to put some targeted youth advisors in particular places to do some levels of support around that. Our youth offending services do a lot of work on restorative justice. I'm sure you're all familiar with that work, but also then linking in with the work that community safety partnerships undertake with schools on particular programs. We had a meeting this afternoon with a number of colleagues to talk about pulling all those together in a coherent place. So there's a lot that goes on to support children, young people, both at the crisis end and those really vulnerable, but also as important, I suppose, at that sort of prevention, that early health prevention element. So a lot goes on, but more work perhaps needs to be done to tie it all together, because it can be quite fragmented at times.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitehead, are you content?
Yes, I am, Chair, and thank you very much for the answers.
Thank you, thank you. It just leaves me. I just have one question, and that's to Beverly Jones. And everyone's presentation has been excellent. The report you sent was just first class. I thought I knew quite a lot about this subject, but I've learned a lot from that report. And indeed, your a follow-up presentation around what's been happening during the pandemic. And it's just on that I would just like to ask a question, because given the very nature of the work involved, social distancing and the current restrictions that have to be in place, do you think it's had a detrimental effect on the work? And do you think that will improve when these restrictions are lifted?
Thank you, Chair. And that's a really interesting question, because it's one that we have pondered over the last year in terms of the impact of our change in our ways of working, and whether that has had a detrimental impact. And it's been interesting because we've had a range of clients who we had to shift to our telephone and virtual support, who had previously had face-to-face support with us. And then we've had a range of clients who have only ever known the telephone support. And I think I'm incredibly encouraged by the fact that we're still able to achieve with the individuals that we support incredible outcomes through the work that quite frankly amazing practitioners do on a daily basis, supporting victims of domestic abuse, and then with our wider partners as well. So in terms of the outcomes that we are achieving, the feedback that we're getting from clients, it doesn't appear that our shift over to telephone-based support and virtual support has really had an impact. Clearly there are very specific individuals who we are supporting who really need some of that face-to-face, and I'd like to reassure the committee and your colleagues that actually where we know and we've identified that there are particularly vulnerable families or vulnerable individuals, then we have provided some face-to-face contact. We have made sure that we've had that eyes on. We've made excuses to drop off food parcels and to take items through to families, just so we can have some of that doorstep contact, so that we can make sure that we maintain contact with them. So I feel quite comfy that actually we have managed to work in a way that has still adequately supported and supported really well the people who are experiencing domestic abuse. And it's interesting that when you look at providing support to particularly people who have experienced trauma, face-to-face in a face-to-face facing each other environment can often be quite confrontational, and the advice is that actually if you can do some side-by-side activity, that's why it works really well with children. When you're playing with them, you do therapeutic work and you're building something or creating something and working alongside, because actually what will come out is a more natural, less confrontational conversation. So what we found is where clients are offered the opportunity to have some kind of face-to-face virtual or a telephone support, they've chosen telephone. And I imagine that that's probably similar to if you were to walk and talk with somebody, you get far more beneficial support than if you were to sit opposite somebody face-to-face, because there's less pressure, there's nobody looking at you, there's no judgment that you can see in that person's face. Not that our practitioners have any form of judgment, but these victims come with a huge amount of baggage and sense of judgment that comes from society, from their perpetrator, from family, from friends. So actually it offers them almost a bit of anonymity in terms of bearing their soul and telling stuff that's happened to them that they might never have told anybody else. So I think there's real value, and what we need to look at moving forward is how we blend what we have seen in terms of the positives of the way that we've been forced to work alongside our more traditional ways of working, so that we can absolutely offer the type of support that really works for the right individual, and offer that face-to-face eyes on, either when we feel that they're vulnerable enough for us to need to know how they're doing, or they need us there physically present for them at that time.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for a very honest and open reply. I wanted to ask the questions, I wanted to give you the opportunity to say just that, and thank you very much. Now that brings us to the end of the meeting, unless any of my colleagues have any further questions. This panel, when we sit as the Crime Disorder Committee, normally takes a lot longer than an average meeting, and we've been at it for 2.5 hours with a short break, but it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it, and so it should be, because I really hope people get a chance to look at this, because a lot of the written reports, but also the verbal information given tonight has just been outstanding. I think the way, certainly in Colchester, I know Roger and colleagues represent the whole of the county, geographic county, not just the administrative county. But in Colchester, the way people come together, I always find just staggering. So I want to say a personal thank you to all of you. I know some of you have not had the chance to speak tonight. You are equally valued as all of the colleagues who've spoken tonight for the work you do. And on behalf of the committee here tonight and on behalf of Colchester Borough Council, may I thank you for that work and that continued excellent work, especially during these very challenging times. With that, colleagues, I'm just going to recommend that we have a vote of thanks to our colleagues tonight. I don't intend to put that to the vote to prolong the meeting. I'm going to just say it verbally, but also write to all the colleagues. Can I just ask for a show of hands just to indicate for my committee colleagues they're content with it? Yes, yes, good. Thank you very much indeed. We will do that and make sure that happens. Right, with that then, colleagues. Mr. Howell.
Sorry, just to ask if we could have a quick talk after the meeting's concluded, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, I was then about to say, could you hang on with Pam Donnelly, please? So we can do just that, as ever. Ahead of me all the time, Mr. Howell. Right, thank you. Everybody else, would you mind leaving the meeting? I'm sure you won't mind, but thank you very much indeed. Great to see you all, and I will hopefully see you again very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.